like to inspire artists to become musicians because there is a strong relationship between both art forms. Basically, if you're an artist, then you'll probably be good at music. Sometimes it's about knowing where to start. The software that is used for making music can be daunting. I find that Midi Art is a way of overcoming that hurdle. As artists, we like to draw. When we draw in software, we become more comfortable with the software. It's like adding a touch of the familiar to the strange environment. I'm going to show you a piece of Midi art that I created. It's a drawing of a face. Originally, I just wanted to create a MIDI clip that was just an eye. Each of those red dots is like a musical note on a piece of sheet music. The information tells the computer what note to play and how long for. When the red dot is high on the grid, it's higher in pitch. When it's lower on the grid, it's lower in pitch. I still wanted this eye to sound musical, and that meant putting all these notes in the same key. This sounds more complicated than it is. A musical key is just a collection of notes that sound good together. Ableton Live has this scale button, and when I press it, it highlights all the notes that are in the same key. There is also a drop-down menu so you can choose the key that you want to use. Then it's a process of drawing notes on those coloured lines. When you do this, you know your MIDI art is going to be musical. That all sounds great, but what if you don't have Ableton Live? There are a few free DAWs, digital audio workstations, that you could use to create MIDI art. If you just do a search for free DAWs, then you will find many options, although they might not have the scale function that's included in Ableton Live. However, that isn't a problem. Here I am in the MIDI grid, and I've switched off the scale mode. I'm going to give you the one piece of music theory that you're going to need to get started. You can sit at a piano and play the white keys, and it won't sound bad because you'll be playing in key. So how does that help us when we are using music software? You'll notice to the left of the MIDI clip there is a piano roll. It's a collection of black and white keys. If we only place notes on the white keys, then the notes will be in the same key. The grid is darker where the black keys are and lighter where the white keys are. This makes it easy to add notes that are in that key. If you're just starting out with music, then you won't care what key you're writing your music in. You'll be thrilled to create an instrumental piece of music and you won't care what key it's in, but later you're going to want to play in other musical keys, and this is easy to do. Here I've written out all the notes of C major. It's all the white keys, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then it returns to C again. This note on the bottom left is the note of C. I'll switch on the scale mode so you can see that these are the correct notes for C major. Now I'm going to highlight all of the keys and press the up arrow on the keyboard, so they all move up one step. You can see the notes are no longer in the key of C major. That note in the bottom left corner is now C sharp. Scale mode and change it to the key of C sharp major. We can see that now all the notes are in the key of C sharp major. Let's highlight all of the notes and move them up another step. That note in the bottom left is now D. If we change the scale mode to D major, then we can see that all the notes are in that key. Basically, if you write something out in C major and then shift all the notes up or down, then they will have been changed to a different musical key. This means you can draw something out using the white keys and then change it to any key that you would like. If you're creating MIDI art in one clip, like my picture of an eye, then you can shift your notes and you don't have to know which key you've altered it to. However, if you have multiple clips playing at the same time, then they all need to be in the same key. You can write them all in C major, but then if you move them up, you've also got to do the same with any other clip that's playing at that time. I could have just created the eye and left it at that. Most MIDI art I've seen is created just in the clip view. But once I'd created an eye, I looked at it in arrangement view and I began to think about what it would be like to do MIDI art across multiple tracks. I wanted to create a full face. I know it makes things more complicated, but it also makes things more interesting. I started by flipping the MIDI clip. This gave me two eyes. If a MIDI clip sounds good in one direction, then it often sounds good in the other direction. I then started adding other facial features. There are some vertical lines for the edges of the nose. I knew the sound would be a lot of notes being played together, so the only way I could make this sound musical was by repeating the same notes at different octaves. Notes don't clash with themselves, so it still sounds musical. I think MIDI art should be visual and musical. It should find a balance between the two. Sadly, this means that each art form is compromising something. To stay visual, more creative musical decisions aren't taken. To stay musical, the visual isn't as refined as it could be. I like creating MIDI art because I like the relationship between art and music, and if you're an artist drawing in Ableton Live, then it makes you feel more at home with the software. However, I want this MIDI art to be a starting point for another piece of art and a piece of music. I went through this piece of music and I picked out some parts that I really like. I've coloured them in purple. I'll play those parts and I'm going to loop them so we can hear how they sound when they are repeated. I then took those parts and repeated them. Repetition and the creation of loops is a key part of creating a song. This is the beginning of an arrangement. The first part is the verse and then the second is the chorus. You can see that it no longer resembles a face, but I'm no longer interested in the visual aspect. I'm only interested in the sound. Let's listen to how it sounds. I then started to add other instruments. Let's hear how it sounds now. My chorus was slow and my verse fast, so I decided to swap them round, and I've also expanded the arrangement more. Let's hear how it sounds. I then began to record vocals. I was just singing along to the instrumental. It was total gibberish, and then I began finding words in the nonsense that I was singing. It's a common technique that I've seen other people do. I really like how intuitive the approach is. Then the lyrics began to shape other aspects of the song. I've changed the key of the music and I've altered other things to make it come together. I'll play the finished track and then we'll look at creating artwork to go with this piece of music. You can feel the truth I imagine. Does the world spin with nature's hand? I do not need to be persuaded. My doubts are fled in golden thread. Way to get that passion over. Ooh, you're mine, I know. Way to get that passion over. Ooh, you're mine, I know. We got money, so no bravado. It's what I know. Their conscious flow. It's how I feel with no distortion. This dawn has won a rising sun. Way to get that passion over. Ooh, you're mine, I know. Way to get that passion over. Oh, you're mine, I know. Oh, we're gonna get ready. Oh, we're gonna get ready, oh, yeah, oh my. Oh, I know that you're mine. 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 Way to get that passion over. Oh, you're mine, I know. Way to get that passion over. Oh, you're mine, I know. Oh, we're gonna get ready. Oh, we're gonna get ready, oh, yeah, oh my. Way to get that passion over. Oh, you're mine, I know. Way to get that passion over. Oh, you're mine, I know. Oh, we're gonna get ready. Oh, we're gonna get ready, oh, yeah, oh my. When I created the Midi Art face, it wasn't a portrait of a particular person. I'm following the original Midi sketch, so it isn't a specific person, although I am aware that whenever you try and draw a random face, it always tends to have aspects of your own face. The face you see in the mirror will always impact any portrait that you do. When you're drawing or painting from the images in your mind, you're accessing a database of faces that you've seen the most. I'm not aiming for realism. If that was my objective, this would be an exercise in observation. I would choose a face and then I would recreate every aspect of that face. You can't create realistic images by using your imagination, but there are other advantages to letting your mind roam free. I can add abstract forms and create something that exists between realism and abstraction. I find that this is the space where you can express emotion and ideas. Midi Art is a great starting point for creating both art and music because Midi Art is art and music. As an artist, you want to experiment with different ways of working because you want to be endlessly fascinated by the act of creating. Add to the culture of the world and create some wonderful art and music.